So we're continuing what for most people is going to be a review. I'm sure you've seen these ideas at some point. We're going to talk about absolute values, and we're going to take another look at the number line, make sure we understand inequalities. So let's get started. So we've already talked about the whole numbers were any number from 0 on up. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We're going to add integers to this now. And integers then are any whole number and its opposite. So we can say if we had 1, it could be -1. Basically, any number without a fraction is an integer. Okay, so as we look here at our number line, we want to make sure we remember how inequalities worked. We're reading from left to right, and we're going to read, so as I look at my inequality, this is the smaller end, this is the less than. This is the larger end, this is the greater than, so left to right. So all of them here are marked on the number line in case any of these give you trouble. Sometimes the ones that are, if you're comparing two negative numbers, that'll make your head spin a little bit. But so I've got 14 is greater than 6, -1 is less than, so we're going up the number line. So obviously on the left side of the number line the numbers are smaller. Now here's the weird one, -1 is greater than -4. It's farther to the right on the number line. 2 is greater than -20. Okay, 15 is greater than 7. -2 is less than 5. Now here's the ones that students will miss. -3 is a greater number than -7. It's further to the right on the number line. 5 is greater than -17. Okay, one more of these here real quick. We'll move on. Oops, sorry, my pen messed up. What have I done here? Okay, hold on. Ignore the graffiti there. 8 is less than 13. 3 is greater than -4. -5 is a smaller number than -2. It's farther down the number line to the left. So this is, we're increasing this way. So 9 is greater than -21. Okay, so it's important in algebra to think of a negative as an opposite. It's a really useful idea. We'll see that quite a bit. So what they're showing us here is that if I have 3, -3, when you put a negative in front, it's like saying the opposite of 3. So the opposite of 7 is obviously -7. The opposite of -10 would be to go the other way, would be a +10. So the opposite of -6, that's what a negative is meaning. That's what they're trying to say. It means opposite in math. So the opposite of -6 would be 6. Opposite of 4, opposite of -3 would be 3. Opposite of -1 is 1. Opposite of 8, opposite of -5 is 5. Opposite of -5 once again is 5. Okay, so we're defining the integers as those whole numbers, 0, 1, 2, 3 up, and then their opposites. So essentially anything without a fraction there that you could count, but so the whole numbers and their opposites. Now we did a little bit of this before where we have an expression, there's no equal sign over here, but we're going to sub in a value that we know. We're going to evaluate it. And so I'm going to sub in for x, and it's 8. Now remember what we just said, a negative means the opposite. So that's -8. Now when we sub in right now, it isn't all that important, but when we get to more complex stuff coming up, it's really a valuable idea to sub in with the parenthesis. So I'm subbing in for x with -8. The opposite of -8 is 8. Okay, same thing here, subbing in a 4. So this is saying the opposite of 4 is -4. The opposite of -4 again is 4. Okay, same thing, I'm subbing in, -11. Opposite of -11 is 11. All right, now many years ago, some mathematician was looking at numbers and they had a very unique question they wanted to answer. They wanted to answer the question, how far away are we from 0? And so it became useful to them to ask this question, not whether a number is 5 or negative 5, but just how many steps I am away from 0. And you see that in both cases, they're both 5 steps away. So one of the things that math does is it abbreviates. An absolute value is asking this whole question of how many steps am I away from 0. Well, this is like shorthand notation. It says all of that just by adding these absolute value bars. So if I put the absolute value around 5, I'm saying how many steps away am I from 0? Well, I'm 5. If I put it around negative 5, how many steps away is negative 5 from 0? It's still just 5 steps. So that's what an absolute value is. It's asking this question in English, which can be summed up with just these magical bars. But if you just want to know what the function of it is, if you put a number inside of the absolute value bars, it magically makes it a positive number. So we put a 3 inside of there, we get 3. Put a negative 44 inside of there, it's 44. We're 44 steps away from 0. And then, of course, 0, still 0. So again, here we've got 4. This makes it 28 and 0. So this is going to make that 13, 47, and 0. Okay, now we're going to take a look at some expressions here to see whether we think these are less than, greater than, or equal. But first we've got to do some tidying up. We have a negative 5 inside of an absolute value. Well, that becomes positive. Negative 5 inside of there is positive, but we had an opposite sign out front, so a negative sign. So 5 is greater than negative 5. Over here I've got 8. Negative 8 inside of there is 8. I got an opposite sign, a negative out front. So 8 is greater than negative 8. This next one I have a negative 9. Now negative 9 in an absolute is positive 9. I got a negative out front, so that turns into negative 9 and negative 9, so they're equal. I've got an opposite of negative 16 is 16. That's 16. It's got a negative out front, so negative 16. Okay, so let's clean these up here. I've got a 9. Now this is 9, but it's got a negative out front, so that's 9 is greater than negative 9. Got a 2 here. Now the absolute value makes a 2. I got a negative out front. 2 is greater than negative 2. So I've got negative 8. The absolute value of negative 8 is 8. Negative 8 is less than 8. Okay, we've got the opposite of negative 9 is 9. This absolute value makes that a 9, and there's a negative and opposite out front there. So 9 is greater than negative 9. Okay, one more of these here. You can always pause the video if you want to try this. I'm going to just keep rolling here. This makes 7. I got a negative out front. So 7 is greater than negative 7. I've got the opposite of negative 10 is 10. This makes a 10. Got a negative out front. 10 is greater than negative 10. Okay, this is 4 over here. Now I've got a 4 but a negative out front. Okay, I've got a negative 1. Absolute value of negative 1 is 1. So negative 1 is less than 1. Okay, now we already talked about please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. And we saw parentheses are a type of grouping symbol. So it isn't just please excuse. We're really looking to do any grouping symbols first. And we're going to add to this list of grouping symbols the absolute value. So we have to clean up what's inside of an absolute value first. Now, one warning here. If you see all of this inside of the absolute value, we do not just get rid of all the negatives that are inside of there. First, we have to clean it up, and then whatever number. So after we have it down to a single number, at that point, we will use the magical power of the absolute value. Okay, so let's start cleaning up here. We already saw that if we had a grouping symbol inside of a grouping symbol, we started as far in as we could go. So we're going to start with this. Let me let them do this for us here. I know this gets a little overwhelming. They started with this. Turn that into 4. Okay, now inside of this grouping symbol, this absolute value, I've got more cleaning up to do. This is multiplication because they're sitting next to each other. So I'm going to multiply 3 and 4, I get 12. Now I've got more cleaning up in there. 19 minus 12 is 7. Now I'm ready to take the absolute value. It's down to a single number. The absolute value of 7 is just 7. Subtract those, I get 17. Okay, so let me show you another one. We've got to work all the way in here. And I really recommend you just go ahead and take your time and do one step at a time. Okay, so I've cleaned up that. Now this is parentheses times the number. That's multiplication. So that's what's next. Okay, now I got to finish inside of this grouping symbol. Okay, now I'm ready for the absolute value. And now we finish up with 19 minus 3 is 16. Okay, pause it if you want to try this yourself. I'm working all the way on the inside there. So I got to start with those two. I get 2. This is multiplication, so that's next. Okay, so got to finish up inside of there. I get 0. The absolute value of 0 is still just 0. How many steps is 0 away from 0? It's 0. And then finished up with 9 minus 0 is 9. Okay, so we're just working on some expressions here. We're evaluating by plugging in, but we're just going to use the absolute value sign. Let me see if I can just... a little overwhelming, but let's try it. We're subbing in for x here, so I'm dropping it inside. Yeah, I don't like that they're not showing the... When I sub in, I'm always going to show this. Okay, I want you to see that it's subbed in. But there's no work to do in there with that parenthesis, so I can just now get rid of it. So I've got the absolute value of 35 is 35. Now in here, we're subbing in the negative 20. Now I have to clean up what's inside of there. So I have the opposite of negative 20 is 20. The absolute value of 20 is still just 20. Okay, let's see here. I've got negative the absolute value. I'm subbing in, so even though it isn't necessary to do anything here, I just want you to see that. I always do that. Okay, so the parentheses aren't necessary, so I have this. The absolute value of 12 is 12. Okay, I subbed in here. Now, you don't have to show all these steps. I just want you to get used to subbing in with the parentheses. That doesn't change anything, so I have this. Absolute value of 14 is 14. I started doing absolute value bar, and I kind of caught it there. So the absolute value of negative 14 is 14, and then the opposite of 14, negative 14. Okay, so we're dropping in a negative 17. Now I'm not going to take a step and take away the parentheses, but there's no work to do in there, so that's just going to become 17. Okay, so the opposite of negative 39 is 39. It's inside an absolute value, so it's still 39. Okay, absolute value of 22 is still just 22. Got that opposite in front, the negative. Okay, I'm subbing in a negative 11. So the absolute value of negative 11 is 11. There's a negative out front, and I'm done with that one. Okay, hold on. Yeah, last one here. Okay, sub in one more time. Got it. The absolute value of negative 23 is 23. Got that negative in front of the y. Got negative times negative 21 would give me 21. Absolute value of 21 is 21. Okay, 37 in there. Absolute value of 37 is still 37. There was a negative out front. Okay, I'm dropping in negative 49, subbing it in. Well, there's no work to do in there, so it just becomes, hold on, I did that wrong. Yeah, I'll just show it like this. Ugh, sorry. So I'm going to show it again where I got rid of the parentheses, but it's a negative 49 in there. That becomes 49. That's the magic of absolute value bars. I've got a negative out front, so negative 49. Okay, so I think the most important idea there is the idea of the absolute value bars and its magical powers that turns everything positive. It's also a grouping symbol. So if you're working with an expression that you're trying to simplify, work from the inside out. And please make sure, just because there's a bunch of stuff inside of an absolute value, you cannot immediately turn everything positive. First you clean it up, and when you're down to one number, then the power of the absolute value kicks in.